Hello, my name is Dr. Colette Canute, and I am the president of the League of Women Voters of Huntington. I welcome all of you, and I encourage you to listen very carefully to the responses of our candidates. I have to say that the League of Women Voters provides a unique environment for voters to hear fully from our candidates. And as a consequence, I ask you to respect each other. If you have a cell phone, please turn it off. And with this in mind, I would like to state clearly that the League of Women Voters has never supported or opposed a political candidate or a political party. In this sense, the League is unique because we are very, very careful to be nonpartisan. One of the things that you will be asked to do is to refrain from recording this forum. Why? Because we want our voters to have an opportunity to hear fully from our candidates. The League of Women Voters provides a full-length video of all of our forums on our YouTube channel. You can find it at League of Women Voters of Huntington, New York on YouTube. We also, when the time allows, broadcast the full forum on cable access TV. I'll be sending out information about that shortly, but know that probably very early tomorrow, because I wake up around 5:30, and I will be on the computer loading it on YouTube. Now, I say that this is a unique environment, and this is a unique opportunity to hear our candidates' positions on a number of issues that are important to children. I want to thank both of our candidates for their attendance. Thank you very much, Senator Marcellino, and thank you very much, Mr. Gaughran. I would also like to thank all of the hard work that was put in by our co-sponsor, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Chapter 2 office, which covers pretty much all of Suffolk, Nassau, and parts of New York City. They're a very active chapter and very, very eager and interested in learning more about how these candidates feel about our children. So with that, I would like to begin by asking the president of the Chapter 2 AAP, Dr. Steve Golston, to say a few words about the American Academy of Pediatrics and then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Golston?
Thank you very much. As you heard, my name is Steve Goldstein. I'm a general pediatrician. I live in Nassau County. I practice in Brooklyn and Queens. I have the privilege of leading Chapter 2 of the New York State District of the American Academy of Pediatrics. The Academy represents 67,000 pediatricians across the United States and Canada. And that includes the 1,500 members in our chapter, which, as you already heard, includes Suffolk and Nassau counties, but also the boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens. We thank and are pleased to partner with the League of Women Voters to bring you tonight's Meet the Candidate Vote Kids Forum with State Senate candidates incumbent Republican Carl Marcellino and Democratic challenger Jim Gaughran. Our thanks to both candidates for their willingness to appear tonight and address important policy issues related to children's health and safety. The American Academy of Pediatrics is a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse candidates. In addition to offering educational and professional resources to our members and patients, we advocate for children in many arenas, including legislative advocacy at the local, state, and federal levels. Through our Vote Kids campaign, we encourage voters like you to evaluate candidates with the best interests of children in mind. They are our future. Tonight's questions were formulated to help us better understand where the candidates stand on the issues that concern us as pediatricians, working to care for children and families, and helping to ensure that the next generation will thrive and be healthy. We see the midterm elections as an opportunity to support the needs of the children that will become the future of this great country. Thank you to pediatricians Eve Creef of Huntington, and Jeff Ostreicher of Northwell, and Cheryl Shah, Vice President of Chapter 2, for their tireless effort, their tireless energy on behalf of children and their commitment to make tonight's program a reality. Our thanks also to the community pediatricians and members of Chapter 2 who are here in attendance tonight and their commitment to children and families. Thanks to all of you for joining us tonight and for your support of children and families in our communities and across the country. It is our hope that we all leave here tonight knowing more about the key issues impacting the lives of children and families, and knowing more about where our candidates stand on these issues. Tonight is about citizenship and the importance of knowing what we care about and how we decide for whom to cast our votes. But I also hope we have some fun and enjoy the evening as we discuss and debate issues that impact us all. Thank you all. All please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think we're ready for the first pitch.
Okay, I'll be your moderator this evening. For those of you that haven't seen me before, my name is Lisa Scott. I have no skin in this game. I do not vote in this district. I live further east. And it's a real honor and pleasure to participate in this debate tonight because it is so different because of the partnership between the pediatricians and the league. As the doctor said, there were questions prepared in advance, but these people hovering behind the curtain here are also going through the questions that many of you have submitted, with an eye towards giving me additional questions that relate to different topics or drill down differently in the topics that we've already had prepared questions on. Just so you know how the timing works, each candidate will have 1 minute to make an opening statement, and they drew lots, and Mr. Gaughran, you're going first, I believe, and then Senator Marcellino. Then I'll ask a question, and, I'll ask a question. Each will have 1 minute. They also have, or should have, red cards. Diane? Yeah? Okay.
I'll bring them.
Okay. A red card we're using as an opportunity to make a rebuttal. And each candidate will have 5 times, not necessarily 5 cards, but he can use it 5 times. I'd encourage you to keep track of each other because occasionally I lose track. But this will give the first person to answer a chance to then respond after the second person has, but only 5 times among the questions we have. Then, right around 8:30, we'll stop with the prepared questions and your questions, and we'll have each candidate have 1 minute to do a wrap-up. After that, I hope they'll stay until the library closes a little before 9, and you'll have an opportunity to meet and greet with the candidates. The closing statements will go in the same order, which means that Senator Marcellino will do the second or last closing statement. Okay? And to reiterate what Colette said, this debate is about educating voters. The virtual voters that will be watching the online full tape, and also you. I would ask after each statement, after each opening statement, feel free to applaud, to cheer, to stand up, whatever you want to do within reason. And then after the second candidate also does their opening statement. After that, I will stop the question mid-sentence if people interrupt. We want to get through the questions. So please, and again, most of you have seen me here and in other buildings in the area with debates, We're serious. We want to get the mask. So at this point, Mr. Gaughran, you want to just test the mic first too, because I want to make sure that they'll pick up.
Testing.
Yep. Okay. And Senator Marcellino, would you just test yours too? Okay. Thank you. Okay. 1 minute, and the timer is right there.
Well, thank you very much, and I would like to thank the League for setting this up, and the American Academy of Pediatricians, and all of you for coming, and I'd also like to thank Senator Marcellino for joining us tonight. The issue of children, I think probably the vast majority of issues that we will be facing in the State Senate, if I have the privilege of serving you, is going to impact children, whether it's issues now dealing with children's health and children's education today, or their future and the decisions that we may make that will impact future generations. I've had the honor of representing the residents of Huntington before. I was a town councilman, I was a Suffolk County legislator, I currently chair the Suffolk County Water Authority. I'm a private attorney. I've represented families and small businesses in a variety of different areas. I ran for this seat 2 years ago and almost won, and I'm running again. And the reason I'm running is I think we need major changes up in Albany, particularly in the State Senate. I feel that the State Senate is stopping a lot of progress in this state, and I'm sure we will get into some very specific areas with your questions, but I thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Senator Marcellino, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Academy and the League of Women Voters for providing an opportunity to be at this forum so that you could hear the positions of my opponent and myself. I was a biology teacher in the city of New York for 20 years. Raised my family, met my wife there. She was a social studies teacher in the same high school, Grover Cleveland High School in Ridgewood, Queens. We taught there for 20 years. We married and children, moved out to the island to be in a place where there was green space, green fields, clean water, and clean air. And that's what we want to maintain. That's what I want to maintain. That's been my focus as your state senator. I chair the Education Committee, and for years I chaired the Environmental Committee. We passed more environmental laws, preserving open space, keeping our water clean, keeping our air clean, so that you would have a good place to live and raise your family. I want to do the same, and I want my grandchildren and my children to stay here on Long Island. This is a good place. We want to keep it that way. I want to make sure that this place is preserved even better than I found it when my wife Pat and I moved here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first question, which we will start with Senator Marcellino, and go back and forth with different candidates starting. There's a statement followed by the question, and the subject on this one is education. Eliminating disparities in the resources available between school children living in lower income and higher income communities is complicated. Despite efforts to amend state tax law apportionments, higher income communities are more willing and able to commit to allocating more funding to their school districts. Increasing school taxes, it's families in lower income communities harder. So the question, what solutions, if any, do you propose to address this problem as it exists for both school children and taxpayers? Senator Marcellino?
The trick is to put the state on a spending diet. We spend too much. We take too much of your money. Good issues. We can always come up with a good reason to take money. We can always come up with a good cause. But the key thing is we've got to make sure that when we do, that we can afford it, that you can afford it, that in your homes you're not being forced out of your homes because of the amount of money that the state wishes to take. We want to make sure that you have your money and you spend your money. You know how to spend it better than the state of New York, and we want to make sure that it stays that way. So by keeping our state budget on a diet, by keeping us under 2%, which is what we've done, and providing record increases in aid to education over the last several years, since I've been chair of the Education Committee, record aid to schools. We have added over $1,500 per pupil to school districts and individual students for the districts to have. So we're going to continue that process. We're going to continue putting more money into the schools so that the school districts have the funds and the wherewithal to do what they have to do to educate our students.
Thank you. Mr. Gaughran?
Well, this is not going to happen overnight, but I think over quite a number of years, one of the things we have to address with funding public education is that we have to increase the amount of money that is coming out of the state income taxes, state sales taxes, so that we can increase how much the state is putting into each individual school district, and then lower the property taxes where we can, commensurate with the increase in state aid, because we're going to get killed, folks, with the Trump tax law, with this limiting to $10,000. And we do have many poor school districts, including in this Senate district, that don't have a commercial base, have less tax dollars. But I want to resolve the issue without taking money from the school districts that are sufficiently funded and that are doing real well. I don't want to solve this problem by having the best schools decline in terms of funding. I want to bring the schools maybe at the bottom up to those same standards, and I think if we provide more funding through the state, that's the way we can do it. And quite frankly, Long Island is not getting its fair share.
Thank you. Please hold the applause till the end now, okay? I want to get to these questions. This one starts with Mr. Gaughran, again on education. You're elected. You take the state Senate seat. What's the first bill you're going to introduce that supports public education, leaving out the discussion of the general funding?
Well, the first bill I'm going to introduce, and it already exists, is the bill to decouple the teachers' evaluations from the student assessments. And the reason we need to do that is because the system is a mess. It's not working. The vast majority of parents on Long Island are opting their kids out, so the test results are meaningless. We need to have standards, but I believe those standards can be set locally. So that's going to be the first thing I'm going to introduce as it relates to education. I'm going to deal with the funding, trying to get our fair share back here to Long Island. But teachers are also under assault in this country, and they're under assault in this state. And quite frankly, the majority leader of the state Senate today referred to teachers as being forces of evil. And I would hope Senator Marcellino would join me in asking Senator Flanagan to please apologize to every teacher in the state of New York.
I am a school teacher. I taught school for 20 years in the city of New York. I do not agree that teachers are forces of evil. Obviously not. They're the ones who we charge with the responsibility of educating our children. They must be protected. They must be given the wherewithal to do their jobs and the support to do their jobs well. I will see that that occurs. I will make sure that there is no such thing as calling teachers and blaming teachers and trying to take out problems on teachers' backs. The teachers are our friends and should be treated well and treated with respect. That's a key element in my proposal, in my plan, and I will keep doing that. I am, was, and always will be a school teacher.
Thank you. The third question relating to education, and Senator Marcellino, would you take this first? Do you believe that charter schools who don't have to follow New York State regulations about curriculum, nor have to accept all students, should get state funding and buses? 1 minute.
Charter schools are public schools, by law. By law, they have to get some funding. They cannot, and they should not get as much funding as the public schools clearly do. They can operate independently on their own, but they are considered public schools. Now, that being said, they should not be given the right to do as they please. They should not be given the right to just go willy-nilly off into the woodwork and play silly games. The nature of the beast is that we must support public education. We must make sure that our public schools get the funding they need. I will make sure that our public schools get the funding they need to support education. And the charter schools will occur, there's no doubt about that. There's a waiting list for people to get into charter schools. But it's the public schools that we're here to support. And it's the public school teachers that I am here to support and will continue to support as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gaughran?
Well, Senator, as chair of the Public Education Committee, you have been shifting millions and millions of more dollars into charter schools that come directly out of public school funding, including right here on Long Island. And basically, you've allowed them to play what you call silly games because you allow them to have standards that are much lower than the standards for the public schools. The other thing that I really dislike about the state funding these charter schools is what is happening is the dollar follows the student. So the charter school will try to pick the best and the brightest to bring into the school. If that young man or young woman is not cutting it, after a few weeks, they're actually thrown out of the charter school. They're sent back to the public school. The poor kid has now lost a lot of time in the public school, has to try to catch up. And guess what? The tax dollar stays with the charter school, and the public school has one more kid to educate without having the funding. So I think this whole trend towards pushing charter schools is really a national movement to privatize public education, and I think public education is a right that we have had in this country for the existence of this country.
Thank you. Mr. Marcellino, do you want to use your red card?
Yeah, I was going to use my red card on this one.
Okay, 30 seconds.
During my years as chair of education and the Education Committee, I've put a record increase in school aid, in school education, $1 billion increase in public education. $1 billion more has gone into the public schools. Increased aid to the 5th Senate School District by the school districts within the 5th Senate District by nearly 30%. Kept my promise to permanently end the school budget crushing, the gap elimination adjustment, the GEA. We've cut that out. Federally imposed state tests are grade appropriate now, as opposed to what they once were. So under my tenure, greater transparency and reducing testing time for the kids, greater assistance for the teachers, greater help for the school districts coming from the state of New York. That's important. We will continue to support public education because that's key. That's what it's all about.
Thank you. Okay, let me remind everyone in the room and also the candidates that, remember, this, contrary to the normal league debates that covers a variety of subjects, there really is a focus on how these issues clearly affect children. Education was the first topic, and that's pretty obvious. The second topic we're going to address right now is gun violence, and then we have several questions on that. And actually, Mr. Gaughran, you would take this one. Newsday has reported reduction in the number of violent crimes that involve firearms in Suffolk and Nassau counties. We all know that these statistics, however, can be drastically changed by mass shooting events and gang wars. What single legislative action could you take as our district senator to significantly reduce gun violence in New York? 1 minute.
Well, there are a bunch of things we have to do, and it all revolves about trying to reduce the level of guns that get into the hands of the wrong people. But if you're asking, the questioner is asking me to pick one topic, that is, we really need to pass what is called the red flag law, the extreme risk protection order. That is a law that simply says that if you are somebody who should not have a gun, that you may use that gun to harm yourself or to harm somebody else, that there is due process. You'll be brought before a judge by a police officer, a teacher, a family member, a variety of people. A judge will make a determination as to whether or not you are dangerous to have a gun. The gun will be taken away from you, and it's even on a temporary basis. And that to me seems to be just something we really need to do. I've spoken to families of parkland victims, and they believe if that law is in place, their loved ones would be alive today.
Thank you. Senator Marcellino?
The right to keep and bear arms is in our Constitution. That we understand. The right to abuse them is not in our Constitution. And no one should be able to abuse the possession of weapons or have weapons who are dangerous. The key element is, if you're going to accuse somebody of something, you need to have due process. There has to be a court, there has to be a hearing, someone has to look at it, and just not on an accusation. If they're going to take somebody's rights away from them, it has to be on the basis of some adjudication, there has to be a hearing, someone must come in and say this person is a threat, either to themselves or people around them. We need to look at that, we need to do something about it, and that's important. But there has to be a judicial situation. It has to be done according to law, and it has to be done carefully. You don't take somebody's rights away just because of an accusation. We just went through one of those things. You just can't accuse somebody and say, oh, automatically they have to lose their rights. That we can't do. But if we can go to the courts and say, hey, this person's a threat, and the courts agree, then we do what we have to do.
Thank you. Mr. Gaughran, you want to use a red card?
Yes, I do. Well, Senator, what you described seems to be the red flag law. As the majority whip, where you have the authority and the ability to bring bills to the floor for a vote, you refuse to do it. You refuse to allow a vote on this bill. And it just seems very simply to me that we need a change in the New York State legislature so that we can allow these bills to even be voted on. Let the senators decide how they want to vote. Let them stand up to the NRA or support the NRA. It's their choice.
Folks, is it really that difficult? You all care. We know that. You know, you are the passionate ones that are coming out and listening and are going to go and vote and are going to bring your friends and your families, and that's fabulous. But we want to hear them tonight. So please don't take up time with the applause, because we really do have a lot of ground to cover. And also, just as a courtesy, we want to make sure that both of the candidates don't start until people are paying attention again, in fairness.
I voted for the toughest gun law, anti-gun law, the SAFE Act.
Excuse me, Mr. Marcellino, that was a rebuttal. So did you want to rebut the rebuttal? Or?
Sure, why not?
Okay, it's all yours, 30 seconds.
The SAFE Act is the toughest law going. I've gotten an F rating from the NRA. F. They don't like my position on guns. They don't know what to say about my opponent. They put a check mark next to his name because they don't know where he stands. I am pro-individual, I am pro your rights, I am against depriving people of their civil rights or their constitutional rights, but if you're going to commit something or if you're going to do something stupid, then we have to take care and do what has to be done.
Okay, you're going to use some of those rebuttals now.
I only got 3 left.
Okay.
Well, Senator, I have an F rating because there's a whole bunch of laws that I'm supporting that you're not even allowing to go vote.
The last thing they put out.
Well, I have an F rating that I am very proud of, but yes, you did vote for the SAFE Act, and that was a good vote that you took. But then in 2015, you voted to repeal the entire SAFE Act. Look at the record, Senator. It's there. Anyone can find it.
No, that's simply not the case.
Okay, gentlemen, I would suggest what you do. No, I think we want to cover a bunch of ground here. Remember that in your close will be your chance to go back and really stress the points that you want people to come away with. Okay? There was a question on the SAFE Act anyway, so I'll give you one more shot via this second question, okay? And this Senator Marcellino. The SAFE Act was a landmark piece of legislation broadening the legal definition of assault weapons to include semi-automatic weapons and strengthened New York's background check system. With respect to protecting children from gun violence, however, Some have said that New York State has not gone far enough compared to its neighbors, including enacting safe storage. Do you support this policy now? And if not, what other policies do you believe will best protect children? And that'll be the final word on this subject, I think. So, Senator Marcellino, 1 minute.
I support safe storage. Of course, if you're going to have guns, you want to put them in a safe place and out of the hands and out of the way of children. We don't want children getting their hands on weapons. We don't want weapons in the schools. I don't want weapons in the schools of any type. I don't want to see a shootout in a public school. That's the last thing you want. So we want to keep them out of the schools. We want to keep the kids safe in schools. We want to keep the teachers safe in schools. And to make sure that people who own weapons treat them responsibly. We don't want people abusing the right to keep and bear arms. The nature of the beast is we must watch what we do, we must be careful how we deal with people, and we must do it according to law. It's as simple as that. We must do it according to the law. So the more laws that we look at, the more we take care of how we store weapons, where we put them, who gets to handle them, the better off we are. And if we're going to take somebody's guns away, we got to make sure that we do it according to law.
Thank you. Mr. Gaughran?
Well, once again, there is a pending bill to do just that, the Senate Republicans refused to allow the Senate to vote on. And there are 31 senators in support of it, so we only need one more vote to pass it. I fully support it. The children in the house, the gun has to either be in the safe or some other lock box. The bullets must be in another area, and there must be a trigger lock on the gun. Look at all the tragedies that we've had over the years because we didn't have a smart law like this. And again, we can pass it in January. I will vote for it. There's already 31 members ready to vote for it. We need to get it done.
Thank you. Mr. Gaughran, this one starts with you. The Federal Secretary of Education has said she may allow schools to use federal funds to buy guns. Do you support this possible action? And what other measures do you support to ensure that schools of New York are properly equipped to protect students from threats of violence?
Well, I do not support the Secretary's approach, and I also will support legislation that is sponsored by Senator Todd Kaminsky, which will be to ban teachers from being armed with guns. As it relates to school safety, I believe the state legislature, unfortunately because of the tragedies we're seeing all over the country, has to provide more funding to school districts for them to use to protect their schools. I think it has to be on a school district by school district basis. Maybe it's more security cameras. Maybe it's more locks. We have some great technology, but I think bringing guns into school at any level, I think, is just a recipe for disaster.
Thank you. Senator Marcellino?
It's very simple. No guns in schools. No guns in the possession of anyone should be in schools. The last thing you want is a shootout in a school. So we don't need the teachers carrying guns. We don't need the students obviously carrying guns. We want to make sure that the schools are safe. That means gun-free environments. We don't need weapons of any type in schools. Many of the buildings are putting what they call man traps at their entrances, and I've supported districts with this and provided them with the wherewithal. In other words, you got to go through a door. Before you can get into the main part of the building, there's another door, and you've got to identify yourself and state the purpose that you're there for. And they have to screen people coming in. That's one way to stop unwanted people coming in or people just wandering into the building. So no guns in schools, period. There's no reason for it, there is no need for it, and we certainly should work as much as we possibly can to stop that silliness.
Thank you. Gentlemen, the next topic we're going to cover is access to health care, which is very important for our children. The first question starts with, Senator Marcellino. New York State reports that there was a significant increase in the number of people covered by the Affordable Care Act program across all counties. Given the federal government administration's move to restrict the ACA, Does New York have the responsibility or not to protect the increased access to medical coverage that families who currently rely on this program need?
The answer is yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Do you want to add to that?
No.
Okay, Mr. Gaughran.
Well, we have a problem in this country, crisis, and also in this state. I really believe that healthcare is a right and not a privilege. I'm concerned that the Trump administration is going to significantly cut back on the funding for all the health programs that we have, particularly for those who desperately need the insurance and can't afford it on their own. And they've already targeted New York on the tax law, and I'm concerned that they're going to target us on that, and they're going to make it a block grant program, and we're going to get less funds. And I want to make sure that everybody has the access to health care, and I do support the New York Health Act. I think it is something that will make sure that everybody has health insurance and that it is no longer just a privilege.
Thank you. And actually, you've anticipated the follow-up question, so you can elaborate on it. The National Center for Health Statistics said the percentage of New Yorkers without health insurance was approximately 5%, nearly 1 million people in this state alone. That means that hundreds of thousands of children in this state are without health insurance during their critical development years. The New York Health Act would provide health care for all New York residents as a type of Medicare for all universal coverage system. You've already said this, but what's your opinion of the New York Health Act? And if elected in the state Senate, how would you go about supporting the act?
Okay, well, I've already responded to the question, but maybe I could just elaborate a little. There's a lot of false accusations about this out there in the public, and one of the things you have to recognize is that we are right now in this state spending millions and millions and millions of our tax dollars when people walk into a hospital and they don't have insurance, and we have an obligation to pay for them. And the hospitals get stuck with the bills, and eventually it gets passed on to all of the taxpayers. And so we got to quantify that money and put it into the system. The other thing is, if everybody had health insurance and coverage, the kids would be there getting well care, getting whatever they need, so that they're not showing up at the hospital now critical or with serious problems that could have been avoided before. It's important to protect the kids, but there's also a taxpayer element to it as well.
Okay, thank you. Senator Marcellino?
Excuse me. The ability to someone to access health care is key. There's no excuse not to have that. So whatever we can do to provide for our young people, for our families, we should do in this state. And I believe we will continue to fund it to the best of our ability. The key element is that we need to make sure that when we put something into place, that we can afford to do it. That means that where we're going to get the money, who's going to pay the bill, and how we're going to fund this thing and make sure that it's lasting. If we do something and we can't fund it, then we have a problem. We're going to have to raise taxes, and we don't want to do that. So therefore, we're going to work hard. We're going to make sure that we don't lose access to health care, and that everybody has access to health care, that there is no child left behind in that situation, and no one should avoid or be worried about where their child is going to get their health care.
Thank you. The next question, still on health care, starts with Senator Marcellino. Pediatricians have a difficult time getting their patients the mental health care they need because mental health services frequently require greater out-of-pocket payments. While Medicaid is the single largest payer for mental health services in the U.S., private insurances routinely require greater out-of-pocket patient payments for these services. Here's the question. What should New York State do or not do to make patient access to mental health care services more affordable?
This question is, this is a difficult one. We should be able to afford whatever we need. Our people, our families should be able to get the health care that they deserve and that they need. And the state should provide whatever funding it can to make sure that the money is there and that the health care is there. We should never, ever prioritize against people's ability to get the proper treatment that they need and proper care for their families. The children that we have, the children that come to the community, coming to the school, should get whatever is necessary, and the school should be provided for whatever is necessary to obtain the kind of health care treatment that they need and must afford. So whatever we can do and whatever I can do, I will do to see that this occurs.
Thank you. Mr. Gaughran?
Well, in my opinion, there's no difference between a bacterial infection or some sort of disease and mental health. It's illness. It's all the same, and it all should be treated the same, and it all should be paid for, and it has to be part of the New York Health Act or anything else that we have to move forward, because we have to make sure that everybody has the ability to seek the help. And, you know, we've been doing an abysmal job here in New York State in the last 10, 15 years with mental health. And I know there's a lot of issues with it, that we used to have institutionalization, and that was a big problem. And now we have other help for people. But you know who deals with the mental health population more than probably anybody in society? It's our police officers. We've made our police officers mental health officers, and I've talked to a lot of police officers, and they tell me that they go through training and they try to get as much help as they can to try to understand, because we as a society, we haven't figured out how to really help these people when we need to.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gaughran, this one starts with you. Opioid addiction is a crisis in our communities. Finding access to treatment services is often difficult and unaffordable for many. What is your strategy to further address this crisis?
Well, here it's really a question of money, because, and I've known people and families who've had to deal with this crisis, and it often comes down to when that individual finally determines that they want to seek help, and they reach out looking for help, and there have been people who obviously have died because there was no place for them to go. When they make that decision on a Sunday evening, there's got to be some place for them to go, and so it really is a question of much more funding and also education, not only of the kids but of adults as well, because too often people are getting addicted to pain. To pain medications, and they just prescribe more, or they ask for more, and they're really not getting the education that they need to find out that this is going to could lead you down a path that could be deadly.
Thank you. Senator Marcellino?
Well, I couldn't agree more. The idea of opioid abuse is a serious problem. The prescription drugs that we get, you may need a couple of days of a painkiller to get past a certain problem. But the prescription may be for 100 pills. And then they're sitting in a vial in a cabinet. A young person can do that. I've seen cases where the kids have parties. They take the pills out of their parents' medicine chest, throw them in a bowl, and the kids go in, they grab a handful, and they take, and they have a party afterwards, and they go and they do what they have to do. Opioid abuse is a problem. Prescriptions should be only based on what is needed by the patient to get them past a limited period of time. If you need more, go back to your doctor and get another prescription. But sometimes these prescriptions are just over-applied. As I said before, you can get 100 pills and only need 4 or 5 to get you past the problem that you're having. So on that basis, the doctors have to take care of what they prescribe to make sure that they don't give out more of these things that are absolutely necessary. So that's a key element, and we have to watch that. And we need the doctors to do just that. If If you need to go back to the doctor for another prescription, you go back. Let the doctor reevaluate, and if you need more, he'll give you more. But not this blanket, just fill up a bottle, and here's 100 pills, and you only need 4 or 5.
Thank you. The next question, Mr. Marcellino, goes to you as well. It's on lead screening. 3 years after the mass public disaster in Flint, Michigan, that exposed thousands of children to toxic levels of lead, New York State laws on childhood lead poisoning remain outdated. Currently, the threshold of lead level in New York is double the level recommended by the Centers for Disease Control, though the American Academy of Pediatrics notes that there is no safe level of lead exposure. The question is, how would you make sure that what happened in Flint does not happen here?
A difficult question to answer. The question is to watch out and to be careful as to what you do and where people go. If there's lead in your house, lead paint, then it has to be removed. If it's in a school has to go back in and take the stuff out. I was the assistant principal in a high school in New York City. We went through the building, literally, and took out and shaved all the windows and scraped the windows to remove the old paint, to repaint them lead-free, to get rid of that stuff from the buildings itself. So that, you have to do. It costs money, takes time, but it can be done and should be done. And we have to be careful in our own homes. What's available to us, what's around us. You cannot allow your children access to something that is dangerous to them. So therefore, it becomes necessary to watch it, be careful, and again, all of these things that we talk about in doing this are going to cost us some money, but that's money that's well spent and should be spent to protect ourselves and protect our families.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gaughran?
Yes. Well, once again, this is an issue where there is legislation in Albany that has the support of 31 senators and needs a 32nd vote, and that is to cut in half the level that declares it as dangerous for society and implement it through all our laws and regulations. That's something important. It's something that we have to do. It's something I will vote for and sponsor. And you can debate back and forth what the level should be at, but there are a lot of people who say any lead at all in the system is dangerous, and some doctors here, so they would know better than I. So I think reducing the level from 10 to 5 is a no-brainer, and I will do it.
Thank you. Mr. Gaughran, again on the health category, flu vaccination in daycare. Last season was the worst flu epidemic in a decade, with about 130,000 cases in New York and 6 childhood deaths. Immunizing children in daycare could protect the most susceptible young children and their adult parents from being hospitalized with influenza. Data from states that have enacted flu vaccination in daycare show that this policy does protect the health of our preschoolers. The question, do you think New York State has a responsibility to better protect young children during the flu season? And if so, what do you propose?
Well, once again, there is pending legislation in Albany that I will support, which will mandate that before a parent puts their child into daycare, nursery school, they have to get a flu vaccine. And yes, there was 6 lives lost, and that is something horrible. But here's something else. We don't know what's coming down the pike. There could be some really strong flu strain that could kill a lot of people. And that's why we want to make sure that we're protecting our children, so that when the parents send them into a nursery school, they know they're going to come home safe.
Thank you. Mr. Gaughran, I'm sorry, Mr. Marcellino. This question, the flu question, is yours too.
Yes, obviously we have to protect our children, and we have to make sure that the vaccinations are there and they're properly taken care of and they're properly under medication so that the flu does not come in and become devastating. You run into some problems with people who have religious beliefs that would give them pause to take vaccinations. They're not overwhelmingly, sometimes they don't like this, or it goes against their religious beliefs. But we still have the ability and we still have the responsibility as a school system to make sure that the youngsters that come into our buildings, come into our schools are cared for, and that there is proper vaccination, and that everybody is healthy and not going to spread a problem around. So this can be done, should be done, and if I'm there, will be done.
Okay. And another question for you, Senator Marcellino first. Use of electronic cigarettes is an epidemic, mostly targeting teenagers. Raising the age of tobacco purchasing to 21 years has been shown to reduce teen vaping and smoking by 50%, and already exists in several states. Appealing liquid flavors in nicotine like bubble gum and banana split are clearly marketed to children and facilitate addiction. Teen e-cigarette use is linked to subsequent marijuana use, and as New York State is poised to legalize marijuana next year, these protections will only become more important. Question: what do you propose New York State do, if anything, to address the e-cigarette use and vaping by our youth?
I'm not too sure that we're poised to legalize pot, but we should be able to, we should watch what's going on. We should be sure that when we deal with our young people, that the access to drugs and the access to opioids is restricted and carefully monitored. We want to make sure that youngsters are vaccinated and get the proper care for that. We don't want our people to have a difficult time. We don't want the problems to come to us and deal with the medical problems that we have. So let's not exacerbate the situation. Let's make it better. And let's make sure that we carefully watch what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gaughran?
Well, I think we should raise the age to 21 also for electronic cigarettes, and we need to regulate and ban some of these flavors, which clearly are, go back to the days when I was very young, when you saw commercials and cigarettes were enticing. I mean, I've lost family members to cigarettes, and so this is what we have to deal with now, and so that is something that I would support. Another thing, we should tax the vaping. And I know I'm using the tax word, Senator, but I'm using it as it relates to this because it's worked with cigarettes. The tax on cigarettes has reduced the amount of people who get addicted, and I think if we taxed it, the young people might do it less or may not do it at all.
Okay, thank you.
Before we go.
Yes, red card. Okay.
I think you have to be careful with this, with vaping. We start banning everything. We start banning this, we ban that, we ban this, we ban that. And before long, you ban a flavor. There's a vaping parlor in Syosset next to a very popular restaurant. You can go in there and sit down and do what you want to do. And to say that we're going to start outlawing flavors, this sort of thing and that sort of thing, I don't know where it ends. I really don't know where it ends. You can only monitor it, you can only keep an eye on what people do, you can only keep an eye on children. Education is a key so that they know the potential for a problem. And if we can educate them and let them know the potential for problems, then that sort of thing works.
Okay, thank you.
I just,
Because
I just want to clarify my position. Maybe I wasn't clear. I was talking about people under 21 years of age. People who are over 21 years of age and want to do it, well, this is America.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gaughran, this one starts with you. What have you done or would you do to protect our groundwater, which provides, and we're talking specifically Long Island here now, which provides our drinking water supply and protect it from contamination by human activity in its many ways?
Well, this is something I have been involved with for most of my public life. As a Suffolk County legislator, I co-sponsored the Suffolk County Clean Drinking Water Protection Act, which is the law that purchased the Central Pine Barrens and lots of other watersheds, including the Frolic and Wicks Farms here in the town of Huntington, so that we forever in Suffolk County have a safe water supply. And today we're facing additional threats. And the threats to a large extent are from nitrates. Nitrates from our lawns, from cesspools especially, are getting into our drinking water. It's also impacting our surface water. The question was about groundwater. And there are things we can do. One, there are some areas that need sewering throughout Long Island because they're basically at the water, they have cesspools at the water table. There also are individual septic systems that we can use to replace cesspools. And we're going to need state funds and incentives to Long Island to pay for that.
Senator Marcellino?
I wrote the law that banned MTBE from gasoline. This is an additive to gasoline to make your cars run better, make the engines run quicker. It's a pollutant, it's a poison. When it seeps down into your groundwater, you drink that stuff, and it's not healthy, and it's not good for us. So to ban that, to keep that out of the groundwater was a key element. I have been responsible for the Superfund law, the pesticide notification law, the first in the nation law phasing out this MTB from groundwater. What we put on our surface gets down into the drinking water. Ultimately, you end up drinking. So we've got to be careful what we put on the surface, because ultimately it's going to get into your drinking water unless we're careful. And by being careful, I mean we've got to make sure that we don't let people just use pesticides and poisons like MTBE willy-nilly as they see fit. Can't do that. That we have to be careful about, and we have to make sure that what we put on the surface doesn't get down into what we drink and what our children drink as clean water. Otherwise, you know, we're going to foul ourselves up later.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marcellino, this one starts with you. You're running, both of you, for a New York State Senate seat. The New York State Senate in the past has not discussed extending the statute of limitations in for taking action against accused molesters and rapists. In New York State, children who are victims of sexual abuse have until the age of 23 to report their assault and sue their attacker. The problem is most victims are not ready to talk about their abuse until they're much older. What is your position on the Child Welfare Act extending that statute of limitations?
There should be no statute of limitation. If a youngster comes forward later on in life, they should be able to come forward and feel free to do that. And they should, their accusations and their case should be looked at individually. They should be worked with and helped. This is not something that we should say, well, you've got only a few years. Things fade, the memories fade. Then something strikes in the youngster's life and brings it back into focus. They'll come forward. We want to encourage people to come forward. We don't want them hiding these things. We don't want people who have committed crimes against our young people to be able to just walk away from it because time goes on. This should never be the case. There should be no statute of limitations on these things. And every case that is brought forward by a youngster, by a person, should be thoroughly investigated to make sure that if there's any truth into it, the perpetrator is properly prosecuted.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Gaughran.
I guess I'm kind of at a loss here, because the Child Victims Act has, I think, 40 sponsors, including a bunch of Republicans. And then again, it is a bill, Senator, that as a leader of the Senate, you refuse to allow out for a vote. And this is something, I talk to people when I knock on doors every day, and there are some victims who are advocating for this and are quite public about it. There are also victims I meet who don't want to be public about it, but they privately tell me this story. And what each and every one tells me, because I know the argument against this is that there's going to be all sorts of law schools, we're going to bankrupt all sorts of institutions and schools and everything else. That's a bunch of nonsense. The people that I talk to know these are going to be tough cases. But they see the same abuser walking around their neighborhood with kids all around them. They want to have justice.
Thank you. Mr. Gaughran, in the event the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, what would be your plans to ensure that women in New York State will continue to have access to safe and legal abortions?
Well, unfortunately, it may come sooner than later because there are cases percolating in the lower courts that will make their way to the Supreme Court and could make their way to the Supreme Court during the next, to the two-year term of whomever is the next state senator. Another bill that's being held up by the Senate is the Reproductive Health Act. I support that. I will provide the 30-second vote, and again, there are some Republicans who say they will vote for it, but again, they're not allowed, nobody's allowed to vote for it. We need, and all that bill does is, one of the main things it does is it codifies the principles of Roe v. Wade. Because if we don't do that, and they overturn Roe v. Wade, a woman's right to choose goes back into the penal code, which means if they want to exercise their rights to their own body, they could be arrested. Their doctor could be arrested, including in situations where it could impact the life of the mother trying to give birth.
Senator Marcellino?
Roe is the law of the land in the state of New York. Roe is federal law. No case currently before the Supreme Court or even anticipated to be decided in the near future would in any way threaten Roe v. Wade. I certainly would not threaten Roe v. Wade. It is fixed law, it is established law, and a woman's right to control what happens to her own body is her business. There is no way I would ever, ever support anything that would interfere with a woman's right to take care of herself and take care of her own body and to handle her own situation. There is nothing that will happen. And there is no case coming before the Supreme Court at this point in time, or even foreseeable future, from what the lawyers tell me, that would in any way, shape, or form take care of or look at that. So in my case, Roe stands, it's the law of the land, I would do nothing to change it.
Thank you. Senator Marcellino, juvenile justice. As of October 1st this year, under the Raise the Age law, children under 17 years old who commit nonviolent crimes will receive age-appropriate housing and programming. Next year, the same law will include 18-year-olds. Studies have found that less than 8% of youth held at such facilities re-enter the justice system after release. Question: what, if any, obstacles might you anticipate in the implementation of this important program?
Could you do me a favor, could you just repeat that opening?
Yeah, as of October 1st, this month, under the Raise the Age law, that was the children under 17 who commit nonviolent crimes will receive age-appropriate housing and programming. In other words, they're not in with the adult prison population. Next year, the same law goes to the 18-year-olds as well. The question is, do you see any obstacles in implementing this program?
No, I do not. The ability to keep age-appropriate kids, to separate them from the hardcore population should be adhered to and should be kept. I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gaughran?
Well, we hope it works because I think it's very important that kids be given a second chance. But I also think it's important that we make sure we're separating out the non-violent, the children who were non-violent, and as it relates to the violent, we have to give them help and support as well. But they need to be somewhere else, and I also believe that they need to be someplace that's not close to a residential community.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gaughran, this one starts with you. The Department of Homeland Security announced a rule that will soon go under public review, that immigrants who legally use public benefits could be denied green cards. Consequently, authorities report that immigrants may be dropping out of public nutrition programs like SNAP and medical assurance programs like CHIP. What do you propose that New York State do or not do, given this situation, to protect the health of immigrant children and their families?
Well, you know, the immigration problem is something that Washington needs to resolve, and it is totally failing to do that. Both parties, but I'm not running for Congress, and neither is Senator Marcellino. But the consequences of them failing to reform immigration, come up with some comprehensive reform, pushes a lot of problems down to the state, which creates costs. I think it's abhorrent that our mother or father has to decide whether or not they want their kid to get food in a nutrition program or even a breakfast in school for fear that they're going to lose their green card and they're going to be deported. There is one school district, I know at least in the 5th Senate District, where right now they just give everybody breakfast because they don't want the kids to have to send in, the parents are afraid of sending in forms to say their kids qualify and could they please have it, because they're afraid the form will get into the hands of Homeland Security and they could be deported. This is a horrible situation that we're just going to have to deal with.
Thank you. Senator Marcellino?
Yeah, I think Jim and I agree on this issue pretty much. There is no reason to deny people their rights or their immigration status because they come in and they bring their kid into breakfast. So if a school district wants to supply breakfast for all their kids, so be it. We should help them and fund that and give them as much aid as they can get to do that sort of thing in the schools. I certainly don't want to see anybody deny their child or a child proper breakfast or proper health care because they're worried about losing their immigration status. To me, that would be abhorrent. So I would not support anything that caused that to occur, and I would support whatever was necessary to make sure that it didn't happen.
Okay. Yeah, red card.
Well, I have a suggestion, Senator. Why don't you and I do something unique? Why don't we both co-sign a letter to President Trump and tell him to stop it?
You got it.
Okay. I think I'm out of red cards.
Okay. Actually, you get one more. But let's go on to the next question. Senator Marcellino. Hundreds of unaccompanied immigrant children are held in detention centers in New York State. New York State currently does not have any oversight regarding the facility's conditions and the care of these children because they do so under federal control. How can we ensure the proper care of these children in our state?
No child in this state should in any way, shape, or form be handled in a less appropriate manner, should not be taken care of appropriately, should be separated from their families in any way, shape, or form. They should be treated to the best of our ability and not in any way, shape, or form put in danger. I would not support anything that did that. I would support whatever was necessary to make sure that those youngsters are treated appropriately, given the proper attention that they need, until their situation can be established and their situation can be rectified and they can move on. But we certainly don't want them, for lack of a better term, abused by the state.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gaughran?
Well, again, this is a horrendous situation that we're dealing with because of the Trump administration and its immigration policy. I mean, separating kids at the border, it's tough enough that they're now in another country where they don't speak the language, but then they ship them, from the south and the west to places like New York. But then we're well, the state of New York is going to have to step up, and we're going to have to look at some of these we're going to have to look at some of these, not-for-profit organizations and some for-profit organizations that are taking in some of these kids and make sure that they are properly supervised, that we can go, that inspectors can go in there at any possible time, any day or night, review the situation, and then shut those down that are not properly protecting these kids and find safe alternatives.
Okay, at this point, I think that's the end of the prepared topics that we had. What I'd like to suggest, we said 1 minute for the close. I'd really like to give them 2 minutes for the close. And also, I would ask each of them to stand when they do their close so that they can project out better. Okay? So, Mr. Gaughran, you do your close first. And then you can applaud if you care to. And then Senator Marcellino, you would do your close.
Again, I'd like to thank the League, the American Academy, the audience, and Senator Marcellino for all joining us here tonight. We have, I don't know how many days left. It's 23 days left in this campaign. And it's already seemed like a very, very long, it already seemed like a very, very long campaign. But I have represented you before, and I've worked very hard. And one of the big things I want to try to do if I get elected to the New York State Legislature is to make sure that we get real ethics laws passed. Now, you may say that's not an issue as it relates to children, but let me tell you it is. Because you heard tonight, one of the reasons that all of these bills that we discussed tonight are not law right now is because of ethics. Because people are able to use their Senate seat, their Assembly seat, to benefit themselves personally. People have the lobbyists come in, the campaign contributions, we have the LLC loophole we have to get rid of so you can't buy senators and assemblymen. That is something that we have to change in Albany because until we get real ethics law, full-time state senators, so you can't use your public position for your private benefit, real campaign finance laws, and banning people from doing anything on their public side that would benefit them by $1. Until we get this kind of legislation passed, we are going to continue to see all of the legislation that we're concerned about for children not passing. So I've represented you before. I very much would humbly ask you if you would give me the opportunity to represent you again. I haven't been in office for 25 years. Back then, there seemed to be a lot more civility. I hope to go to Albany to bring more civility to the process, and yes, to work across the aisle with Republicans. So once again, thank you so much for coming tonight and listening to the two of us.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I do appreciate the fact that you're here, that you've come here to hear the candidates and hear us talk and hear us give our opinions and our positions on the issues of concern. I am a full-time state legislator. I do not have a second job. I do not have a second income. I'm not a lawyer, thank God. And I intend to keep representing you to the best of my ability. I work full-time. You can find me in my office. Most of the time, if you can't get me directly, my staff will get me the message. I will get back to you personally. I've held community meetings throughout the district, talking to people, talking to my constituents, always to hear what you want to hear, what you want to give me, what you want me to do in this campaign, and as I represent you in Albany in the state Senate. I am a full-time legislator. I do not have a second job. I do not take money from special interests. My record is clear. My record is open. You want to find out who contributes to me? Look at the filings that we do with the Board of Elections. You can find exactly who are my contributors and how much they give. That's all open. I support complete, absolute openness and honesty in this thing. Everybody should know exactly where our money comes from and who is contributing to our campaigns. I support that, will always support that. You will have a continued full-time legislator. I will not ever sell my seat to any organization or to any group because of dollars or money or contributions. That's never happened, it never will happen, and in my case, I will make sure that whatever rules and whatever laws that I need to be written will be written to make sure that that's not a possibility. I am your representative. I work for you. You don't work for me, I work for you. My job is to be responsive to your concerns and your needs. I believe I've done that for the last 20 years, since 1995 when I came into this special. I hope you will give me the opportunity to serve you for 2 more at least, so that I can be there and represent you for more years to come. And I promise you that you will have the most effective legislator that you can get in the state Senate. Thank you very much, and thank you.
And thank you all very much for